Good evening and welcome back to another episode of It's a Football Thing. Your eyes do not deceive you. Robbie is a little bit under the weather. He's still sick from that footage of Mitrovic this morning. RJ's got some family commitments on. The boys will be back next week. But you know what I've done? In the true spirit of this channel and the content we try to bring, I've not just replaced Robbie and RJ, I've hit upgrade. So I've got a better Manchester United fan. He kind of looks like RJ, same haircut. We've got Tom in the chat in the stream from the United Podcast. Evening, Tom.
No, evening, mate. Pleasure always to be on, especially thank you for inviting me on after a Manchester United win and not after a loss. So always a pleasure, mate.
I do always try and get you on after the rough games, but you know what? Congratulations, you're going back to Wembley. And his internet is giving us a little bit of grief at the moment, so I'm not sure if he's with us at the moment. Marty, you with us, mate? No, I think he's got some stage fright. That's okay. I'm sure Marty will rejoin. He'll jump back into the stream when he's ready. But for now, Tom, let's kick off. Let's get straight into your game. Marty will jump back in. What the hell went down this morning? Because obviously I didn't watch this one live. I know that straight after this at 9 o'clock, you boys are going to go right in depth with the match on the United Podcast. So we won't go too deep on the match, but let's just talk about the good part. Let's talk about when stuff went down. Welcome back, Marty. Let's talk about what went down from the handball. Can we all agree, boys, the Willian handball? Anyone have any issues with that? I had no issues with that or the punishment.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things that should make the sort of the following couple of minutes even more crazy in terms of what the hell Fulham were arguing about. There was a clear handball.
You had no beef with that.
Oh, for me, well, definitely if there's a Manchester United fan, but even like it hit his hand on the goal line. Like if his hand wasn't there, it's a goal. So Marty, he can talk deliberate or body shape or whatever. But for me, clear handball.
No issues, Marty.
No, none at all, mate. It's been as far as handball's been consistent this year or not been consistent this year, but no, dead set handball, you call it.
Yeah, for me, look, the worst part was it prevented a goal. I mean, was his hand not there? It's a goal. So I had no issues with that. But then, Tom, you saw it in real time, so I want you to have the first word because then I've gone back and had a look at it. Mitrovic absolutely lost the plot. What happened in the aftermath of the handball call?
Your guess is as good as mine. Who knows? Which makes it so confusing in regards to, as we said, all three of us here, and I think everyone around the world is in agreement that it's a penalty now. When the referee was checking the VAR monitor, the Fulham coach has gone over and said something, and that has resulted in him getting sent off, whether it was deserved or not. That's obviously what happened. So I don't know if that has rolled up the Fulham players. But then obviously the VAR came back, there was a penalty. He pointed to the spot, then naturally, obviously, his hands were tied, had to obviously give Willian the red card. And then Mitrovic gets in his face. And look, again, I don't know what was said, but you don't have to be a lip reader to say it wasn't kind words. And then, look, well, I think we'll get into a Manchester United discussion in regards to Bruno potentially putting hands on a referee the other week. But in terms of what Mitrovic did, this was, look, you boys would know, obviously, Paolo Di Canio back in the day when he was at Sheffield Wednesday. It's maybe not that level, but my God, it was pretty similar. In regards to this wasn't just a push. This was an aggressive action. Okay, he didn't kill a guy or anything. It wasn't that bad, but this was a really aggressive action against the referee and lost the plot. And look, I think we know Mitrovic kind of has this in his locker, and why it came about, I'm not sure. There was one or two potential frustrations in the first half for him with a bit of a tussle with Harry Maguire, but ultimately, I think all of us can agree there's definitely no need for what we did see.
No, certainly not, Marty. Just wouldn't mind hearing your views on the Mitrovic reaction and what you saw this morning.
Mate, it's when they were trying to compare it to Bruno. I mean, I said in Twitter today, they were chalk and cheese. Mitrovic comes at the referee. It's aggressive. It's in his face. It's just not on, and you just don't do it. Bruno is more like oh, sorry, mate, you're in the way kind of thing. Let's get on with the game. They are chalk and cheese. I think Mitrovic is in a lot of hot water. I think he's out for a number of weeks. I don't know what you boys reckon, but there's got to be a sit on the sideline now, and that's a massive blow to Fulham.
Yeah, look, hard to argue with that. Now, you said you can't compare the two. Obviously, I wouldn't be me. I wouldn't be who I am, and I wouldn't be fulfilling my role on this show if I didn't compare the two and do exactly what Marty just said I shouldn't do. Now, I want you boys to do something for me. My bias is on the table. I hate Manchester United. It's no secret. I would have loved you to be knocked out this morning. No secret. I'm not saying anything nobody knows. I want you to think about both the incidents, the Bruno and the Mitrovic, but stop the second the red card's given, because Mitrovic lost the plot even more after the red. I think his actions after the red are where now the next level suspension comes from, rightfully so. I'm not saying he shouldn't be suspended. They're going to make an example of him because we don't want those scenes. But just looking at the two incidents of the shoves, I think neither was okay. And I think both should have been reds. But no, obviously, we're talking about suspensions. We're talking about a player sitting out what I think should be an extra 3 or 4 games. I'm not saying that should apply to Bruno because the force in his shove, different. But you do some coaching, Marty. I know, Tom, you and I both work in areas where there's some coaching involved. You're taught never to touch the referee. And both players shoved the ref. So I would say both should have been a red, but no further suspension or punishment for Bruno, because when you look at the two, Mitrovic just absolutely loses it after the game, and he's got that in his locker. Tom, I'm guessing that you probably think I'm being a little bit ridiculous here.
No, look, it's hard because you do have to apply context, but also you do need to apply almost like a bit of a blanket sort of ban to all these things. As you say, don't put hands on the ref, whether you hit him or you put your hand on his shoulder in a friendly way. If the rule is you don't touch the referee, that is the rule. So even if you do it in a friendly manner, if you're going to be really strict on the law and make sure you've never really been sort of put in a grey area, Bruno should have got a red card 100%. Now, ultimately, in the context of it, it really wasn't a red card offence in regards to the referee actually grabbed Bruno Fernandes in maybe more of an aggressive manner, not an aggressive manner, but in applying that context. But ultimately, if Bruno had been sent off, while I thought it would have been technically the wrong decision, he couldn't have had any complaints because he knows if you put hands on referee. But he couldn't have had any complaints if he was sent off and suspended. Those potentially the rules. Now, Mitrovic is definitely a different case, and I think he will serve that ban because of that. By the time you go back to it, and it does sort of add an interesting sort of spanner into it in regards to the differences and how they will be treated. But I do think ultimately they sort of will be treated differently, and I think that is the correct decision because I do think they are two very different cases.
Fair shout. We won't go too much further on the game because, like I said, straight after this stream, Tom will be live on the United Pubcast. They're tagged in the description. So if you want some more insight, make sure you check that out. Let's move on because it's been a week, boys. It's been a week of dummy spits, aggression, goals, action. We move on to the gift that keep on giving. Tottenham Hotspur. I reckon this one Marty's been keeping away for a little while. Marty, let's not talk about your form because the form has been terrible, right? We all know that. I want to talk about Conte in his press conference. To me, it came across as a massive whinge fest. Now, I feel my preset position on this argument is that Conte is a protected species. He's no longer as good a manager as he was. He's got a team there that's got some very good players. You've got some players that you've got Kane, who's world class. You got Son, who has played to that kind of standard over the last few years. And Poch managed to get this team without as much financial backing to a Champions League final. I think Conte's in the wrong to come out publicly and chuck everyone else under the bus, really, except himself. He's a protected species to me. Daniel Levy should show some cojones, sack him, bring Poch back. Marty, over to you.
Oh, dear. It ain't black and white. We can start off with that. It ain't a black and white thing. For me, a lot of what Conte said was the truth. A lot of it was the truth. The club haven't fully backed and supported them. Gone through Mourinho, Pochettino, Conte. These are high-quality guys who know what they're talking about. The club has not backed them, and let's be honest about that to start with. The players, have they performed well week in, week out? Is that to do with coaching as well? Absolutely. But I think there's a little bit of performance kind of, they just haven't lived up to. You can't go and play teams like Sheffield United and not have the quality within yourself to win those kind of games. That's not a tactical thing. That's just a spirit thing. The only part that I don't agree with Conte was when he went out and he actually personally attacked the players. That's a behind closed doors thing. And we know that Conte, he's done it before, where there's been these outbursts, and he's come out later and said, yeah, that's to fire up the lads, that's to get behind and all this. This wasn't one of those. This was one of those, he's frustrated with the support that he's not getting, but he's not shouldering any of the blame himself. So to me, I think it's untenable that he can't stay there anymore with what's happened, and I totally agree with that. Do we bring in a Pochettino? I'm not a great fan of that either. He didn't end on great terms, and he had a spell. Like, the club needs to change. We can't just bring back the same thing. With the players we've got now, we could bring in Arteta, we could bring in 10 Hag, 20 Hag, 50 Hag. It wouldn't matter right now. The way the club is set up with the squad, it's just not going to work. So there needs to be change, and bringing Pochettino back into me is like saying, oh, yeah, we stuffed it up before. Can we just jump back another 4 or 5 years and let's give it another go with these guys 4 or 5 years older than they were? And Kane's the other side of 30. Sonny, I love him to death. He just hasn't been the same player. Lloris is going. We just need a bit of an overhaul going on in the whole of the team. And I don't think bringing Pochettino back is that way to go.
Tom, would you bring Poch back? I mean, look at what Poch did with those players. And Poch, I don't remember Poch ever getting the money to chuck at Richarlison, Basuma, Perisic. They bought in Forster. They bought in Spence, Kulusevski, Bentancur. Like, he's made a lot of signings, Conte. Do you think Poch maybe could just get them back?
I say this tongue-in-cheek, but I said I called this at the start, and again, a little bit of a banterous nature behind it. But the day Antonio Conte signed for Tottenham, I said that guarantees Pochettino is going to be their next manager. I just thought Conte is not going to survive at Tottenham. I thought that's going to end in disaster, which it looks like it's going to. Pochettino at the time was at PSG. I said he's eventually going to get the sack no matter what happens at PSG. So he's going to need a club. Tottenham are going to need a manager. And I just think, okay, what other managers are going to take that job at Tottenham? You're not quite sure. Which other big clubs are going to go after Pochettino? You're not quite sure. So I thought it would sort of end up back as it started, and it might actually happen. Would it be a good move for club and manager? I'm not sure. I think Marty sort of hits the nail on the head there. It looks a little bit of either a sideways step or a backward step. But I'll throw the question to Marty in terms of what is the job at Tottenham? Like, okay, manager coming into Manchester City to replace Guardiola is to win the Premier League and win the Champions League.
Yeah, it's to me, the manager's job at Tottenham is where it's like there's a company car at Tottenham and they don't give you the keys, but they let you drive in the passenger seat. So you can give a bit of direction, but you don't have the steering wheel.
And but with success, I mean, like,
or a Mourinho.
How do you value success, though, in regards to obviously trophies, but you look at the position which Antonio Conte points out, obviously success is very hard to come by. So do you go and get that world-class manager like a Conte, like a Mourinho, but ultimately you're not in real position to give them what they want by titles, but then you sort of going down 1 or 2 sort of rungs on the ladder, and maybe that guy's not good enough for Tottenham. So I'm just thinking, what do you want out of the next manager? Like, what do you want him really to succeed realistically?
There needs to be a trophy in that very empty trophy can that we've got right now. We can't have a manager at the helm who's going to say getting into the top 4 is a win for us. It's qualifying for a championship, great. But at the end of the day, it's not a trophy. It's not winning the Premier League. It's not an FA Cup league or anything like that. It's a position that qualifies you for another competition that then brings some more, pounds into the club. And the noise at the club this last month has been about go-kart tracks and concerts that they're putting. The football club part of it just seems to have drifted. Yeah, it's just, to me, I want to bring it. I want to manage it. I mean, I know it's hard to say for the long term. Coaching is such a cutthroat game. I get that. But I want a manager to come in. Conte is not committed. He still hasn't fully committed for next year or anything. He's still talking about, well, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. How does that make the players feel week in? They're like, well, I'm here next year. Are you here next year? And it's just all these kind of, if that, we need to bring someone in who's committed, who's obviously got to be a world-class guy to manage the club, but they've got to have trophies on their agenda. And they've got to do what they need to do to get it, and Levy's got to get on board with it.
Look, ultimately, Spurs are going to be dying for a trophy. It's been a long time, but when you talk about winning a trophy, I just think you're light years away at the moment. I think there are a lot of teams that are much better, and I'm not even trying to take the piss now. I feel like Arsenal, beyond all my wildest dreams this season, have just clicked. Manchester United under Ten Hag are looking like a different beast. City are City. Chelsea, you have to wonder how long they'll stay in the mud.
I think what hurts, Scott, Tottenham mainly is Newcastle. Newcastle, 6 months in, they got to a cup final. Like, okay, they didn't win it, but they're very close to winning it.
Yeah, it's all of that. And I mean, for me, I think Spurs minimum expectation, because I always like to talk about what's your minimum expectation. I said on the eve of this season, my minimum was top 4 or Europa League. Either way, the minimum thing I wanted from Arteta was to get into the Champions League, because you have to acknowledge it's going to be hard to win cups. We're obviously out of the Europa League, but it's looking like we'll lock down Champions League, so I'm happy to lock that one on air. But for Spurs, I just think, Marty, you guys are miles off, and it's not because you're not signing players. We heard a lot of talk about Kulusevski, Bentancur. When Richarlison came, he was going to turn it all around. He hasn't even scored a goal. I don't know, Marty. Just quickly, you said you didn't want Poch. Who would be Marty's choice?
I think that's something that you ask me each day, and I'll bring in someone different. I can't even get to that point yet. To me, we're in, as you said, we're in the mud. But we can flip it a little bit. We're still in 4th spot. Okay, there's a couple of teams right on our hammer with a couple of games behind, a couple of games in. But you know what? We could still make 4, and as far as the club's concerned, that's pretty happy. If Arsenal don't clinch the Premier League, we'll have the same season. We both qualify for the Champions League, and everything's happy, right? So, it's not like we're in 6th or 7th or 8th and we're falling apart, but we should be doing a shitload better than what we are doing right now. We should be.
Yeah, fair shout. Look, let's talk about my team then. Obviously, Marty's just mentioned them. Knocked out of the Europa League. It is Europe's premier competition. Not anymore. I found myself on the eve of that result. Like, when it happened, I wasn't furious. Now, normally, like when we get knocked out of something, for example, when we got knocked out of the FA Cup, I find it really hard, like that day, to concentrate or do my job or be a nice and happy human being. Like, I find it really hard. I kind of silently brood on my results. I'll just go missing from group chats for a day or two. But I don't want to say it, but I'm going to. I was okay with that. Believe me, if I had a choice, we would have stayed in. But if we had to go out of that, I can cop that on the chin. What that does do, though, is up the pressure on us to win this league. Because if we do not win the league, Marty's absolutely right when he says then, well, Spurs finished 4th. We've pretty much had the same season. We've done all this hard work, been at the top for so long. For what? For nothing. So for me, my minimum expectation has shifted. I want the title. I want this title. We got bundled out of the FA and Carabao Cups. There's no Europa League. Everyone else around us has distractions. We need to focus on that league. Tom, I know you've been quite vocal in saying that you think we've won it. You still feeling confident that Arsenal are going to wrap up this league?
Yeah, I'm extremely confident now. And you said, yes, it ups the pressure in terms of being knocked out of the Europa League. I think, okay, technically, yes, it does up the pressure, but it also helps. It benefits you not having that competition now. So it's a tick in the box more for Arsenal. I look what they did overnight. I didn't see the goals. Obviously, it was a few hours before the Man United game, but just rolling along. And I just think ultimately, I'm not putting Arsenal in the same category as Leicester City, but at the start of the season, there were the kind of those sort of feelings in regards, okay, they'll fade away at some stage. We're looking now, I don't know how many games left. We've got 10 or 12 games left. I'm just thinking ultimately in 2 or 3 weeks, there'll be 7 or 8 games left, then there'll be 5 or 6. And we had the same discussions around Leicester. And ultimately, it's only going to take one bad result, well, not bad result, but one defeat to Manchester City on the same week that Arsenal win, and ultimately Arsenal don't look like they're not going to stop winning at the moment. It's Manchester City going to drop points eventually again because they've got a huge distraction. Who have they got in the Champions League? The Bayern Munich. It wouldn't shock if they drop points around that era, around that week. I'm just thinking, I think at the next stage, Manchester City play Arsenal could be double digits ahead in regards to, I think they would have played 2 games in hand more, I think, maybe in terms of the kickoff times. But I'm just thinking there, like, look, it's not putting pressure on you, Scott. Like, look, the Arsenal players aren't listening to you and me talking about it, so it's not going to put pressure on the players. But I ultimately look at it and look, I can sit here and say, as someone who's won the title, I haven't done it, Manchester United haven't done it for 10 years, so who am I to talk? But it definitely does have the feeling of when Manchester United just run along and just sort of, it was a standard win, 4-1 against Crystal Palace. Yep, move on. And ultimately, 2-3 years ago, if Arsenal won 4-1 against Crystal Palace, it would have been this huge celebration. And rightly so, because that would have been kind of a huge result now. It's just the next step. And ultimately, if you're just taking these little steps, that's a sign of a good team. And I have to say, just in regards to the moments Arsenal have had, last-minute winner against Manchester United, the 2-0 down against was a Bournemouth coming back winner in 90th minute, whatever it is. And I'm just thinking that you don't get those moments and finish second. Manchester City have had those moments when they win the league. Liverpool had those moments when they win the league. Arsenal have had 2 or 3 of them. And I just think I've never seen a team have those moments and not win it. And ultimately, if you do strip everything back, who's been the best team this season?
Oh, it's been us.
It's been Arsenal. And name a Premier League season where the best team hasn't won it.
You know what? You speak about moments, and I just see Steven Gerrard slipping over in my head. I just see that slip in my head. So moments can go both ways. And look, your manager put the jinx on us. Now we've got some injuries. Thanks, Ten Hag. But look, a couple of injuries can really derail everything. So I'm not taking anything for granted. Marty, there's still one more topic I wanted to discuss, but any views just generally on the season Arsenal are having, and do you expect them to outlast Manchester City?
Look, far be it from me as a Spurs fan to jump on the Arsenal bandwagon, but I have said that I would prefer Arsenal to win at the Man City, and I've made that clear. And also far be it from me to say that it's not that long ago where Arsenal have been in a position where surely they wouldn't drop down, and they did, and it was in the last couple of games. So anything can happen, but I agree with Tom. I just think there's just the games that are left, the points they pick up, it puts the pressure on City. And, I think they'll get over the line, as much as it pains me to say it.
All right, boys. Speaking of City, they kind of bring up the last talking point I had for tonight. I want to talk about Erling Haaland. The guy scored, I think, 8 goals in a week or something. He's an absolute freak. Now, I know when he's kind of gone a game or two without scoring, or maybe City haven't looked sharp, I've kind of noticed that there's been a bit of tall poppy syndrome. People kind of saying, a City too reliant on him? Were they better without a striker? They signed him and they're not winning the league. To me, Erling Haaland is world-class. Now, I don't know if you saw our video we did where we talked about world-class players. One of the things I said was consistency. And he's done this at Dortmund too. He was firing in goals for fun. As a striker, to me, the kid is world-class, top tier, and I think a victim of his own success in that he's set the bar so high that when he's not scoring 8 goals in a week, he's copping some criticism or not getting talked about the way that I'd say, for example, Saka and Rashford. There's been so much talk about those two who are phenomenal and in world-class form. But I feel like Haaland, it's just assumed now, it's just expected that he's going to continue breaking records and banging in the goals. Do you think I have a point there, Marty, or is this just me whinging for the sake of whinging?
No, mate, I'm 100% with you. It's almost like, the minute you see City have scored a goal and it's not Haaland, you think, whoa, what happened? It's just that automatic. The kid is a freak, and he's a young fella. Let's not think that he's a seasoned pro. It's his first year. I know he's played, obviously, different places, but first year in the Premier League. And he has just adapted, bang. He's the most, and I'm a Harry Kane fan, obviously, but this guy is the most lethal striker in the competition. The EPL is fortunate to have him, but I'm totally with you, mate. I just, I think it's very much the tall poppy syndrome. I think it's very much that we just expect this really, really high bar, which he delivers on most days, most weekends. And when he doesn't, we go, oh, what's wrong? I think we're looking for excuses. The guy's an absolute freak.
Tom, is he world class?
How many goals he scored this season? It doesn't matter how you play. Football's about winning.
That high, Tom.
Football is about winning. It doesn't matter how you play. It is a results-based business, and I think when we discuss that, we think 3 points or we think trophies. If you break it down individually, when we're talking about specific players, well, it's about scoring goals. Now, no one grows up wanting to be a right back or a left back or a centre back. Everyone gets the ball and kicks the ball towards the goal when they grow up. So that's the main part of the game, scoring goals, and he does it better than anyone. Now, we can obviously have an argument. Is City a better team without him? We had that with Ronaldo last season. Ronaldo scored our goals, or would be a better team without him? I think every great player, every unique player has that situation. Lionel Messi, look at how Barcelona caved to Lionel Messi. Look at the situation Barcelona are in now financially. If they wanted the great player Lionel Messi was for all those years, well, the price they pay now is the situation their club find themselves in. I'm seeing all these players have this sort of price. So Erling Haaland, yes, Manchester City might not play the best football, and it might ultimately, who knows, even cost them a Premier League title in regards to the way they play. But ultimately, that's not Erling Haaland's fault. If they can't, the other players can't sort of get up to grips with it and perform like they did last season, that's on them. So Erling Haaland, unfortunately, is the definition of world class in terms of the current climate.
Yeah, well said here, Stu. And this gives me confidence as an Arsenal fan that it's not much goal difference between Arsenal and City. We're starting to creep up. You can see Larry in the chat, and make sure click on that link because the pubcasts are going live very shortly. We're about to wrap this up. World-class goal scorer, not a world-class footballer. Well, look, his job, everyone on the pitch has a job. His job is to finish chances and score goals. He is doing his job at a world-class standard. He may not have all the tricks or the flair that players like Ronaldo and Messi have, but he's certainly getting the output. But, I mean, look, that could be a whole stream right there, and I don't want to make you late, Tom. But, yeah, I don't know. I'd probably lean towards he's a world-class footballer if he's doing his job. Kyle in the chat, Scott, are we going to do it? Yeah. Look, I'm not going to lock it in, but at the moment it's looking like it'd be harder to lose it than win it. But ask me after we play Liverpool, City. I think we're going to play Chelsea again too. And we'll go from there. And a big good evening to Lottie. For those that have just joined us, make sure you go back, check out the video from the start, drop a sub and a like. We're trying to help the channel grow. And, of course, check out the guest channels because these guys are fantastic. Boys, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you talking football. 10 cup finals to go for Arsenal. Manchester United are Wembley bound after Fulham handed it to them. You like what I did there, Tom? And Spurs, well, Spurs are Spurs. This is what they do. Let's watch with interest what happens. Marty, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, boys, it's been good to jump on. I've been finishing off uni for the last 3 or 4 months, so I've missed a lot of this chat and this banter and listening to the Arsenal Roadshow. So looking forward to checking you guys week in, week out, and thanks for having us on, mate. Been good to have a chat.
Pleasure. Make sure you check Marty's channel out in the description. Tom, any closing thoughts? The people can follow you to the United Pubcast because they're going live right after this video. Link in the description. But Tom, what do you got to say, mate?
Yeah, no, look, always a pleasure coming on. I wish next time was more not so rushed, but always enjoyable chatting, all things football, Man United especially. But always enjoy this show. It's where I do get my Premier League discussion. But if anyone does want a bit of Man United specific discussion in the next 5 minutes, head over to the United Pubcast. Whether you love Bruno or hate Bruno Fernandes, I'm sure he'll dominate a lot of the discussion. So feel free to come and join us then. But no, I'll be tuning in next week, Scott. Always enjoy it. And look, I do say, Scott, you probably won't like this. I do want Arsenal to win the league. I don't want Manchester City to win 3 in a row. And it is one of those things.
It's a Ten Hag treatment. Arsenal have had their players available all season, except Jesus, Tomiyasu, etc. And then boom, Saliba injured. We're starting bloody Rob Holding again. Don't you Ten Hag my team. Leave us alone.
Lock it in, Scotty. Lock it in.
Yeah,
Lock it in.
That's it. Take care, everyone. Make sure you sub, like, and check out the boys' channel straight away. Take care.
Yeah.